The first fine arrived on my doorstep at 6 in the morning, and I knew immediately that Patricia Henderson had struck again. I stood there in my driveway, still holding my snow shovel, staring at the bright yellow envelope taped to my front door. The sun was barely up over the rooftops of Meadowbrook Estates in Boulder, Colorado, and I had just finished clearing the driveway for my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who lived 3 houses down. My own driveway was next on the list, but apparently I had committed some grievous sin against the homeowners association. I ripped open the envelope with numb fingers, my breath fogging in the cold January air. The letter was typed in official-looking font, complete with the HOA letterhead and Patricia's signature at the bottom, along with 2 other board members I barely knew. "Dear Mr. Coleman Garrett," it read. "This letter serves as official notice that you are in violation of Meadowbrook Estates HOA Regulation 14.3 B. Excessive noise during restricted hours. On January 12, 2025, at approximately 5:47 a.m., you were observed operating a gasoline-powered snow removal device in violation of our community quiet hours, which extend from 10 o'clock p.m. to 7 o'clock a.m. on weekdays. This violation carries an automatic fine of $250, payable within 14 days. I read it twice, then a third time, unable to believe what I was seeing. My snow removal business, Rocky Mountain Clear Paths, had been operating from my home for 3 years without any issues. I had all the proper licenses, insurance, and my truck with the plow attachment was parked legally in my driveway. During the winter months, I left early to service my commercial clients before dawn, which meant starting my truck and equipment before 7. The sound of a door opening made me look up. Patricia Henderson stood on her front porch across the street, wrapped in a cream-colored robe, a steaming mug in her hands. She was watching me with that satisfied expression I had come to recognize over the past year since she became HOA president. "Good morning, Coleman," she called out, her voice carrying easily across the quiet street. "I trust you received our correspondence." I walked across the street, the fine still clutched in my hand. "Patricia, this is ridiculous. I run a legitimate business. I have to leave early for work." She took a slow sip from her mug, her eyes never leaving mine. "The HOA bylaws apply to everyone, Coleman, no exceptions. We have residents who work night shifts and need their sleep. Your truck is incredibly loud at that hour. I have 23 clients depending on me to clear their parking lots before their businesses open. I cannot wait until 7 to leave. Then, perhaps you should consider relocating your business to a commercial property," she said, that same satisfied smile playing at her lips. "Meadowbrook Estates is a residential community. We have standards." I felt my jaw clench. "I work from home like dozens of other people in this neighborhood. Sarah Mitchell runs an online business and gets deliveries at all hours. Tom Bradshaw has his carpentry workshop in his garage and uses power tools constantly. Why am I being singled out?" Patricia's expression hardened. "Those residents are not violating noise ordinances during restricted hours. If you have an issue with the fine, you are welcome to appeal at the next board meeting on February 1st. However, I should warn you that any additional violations will result in escalating fines. The second offense is $500. She turned and walked back inside her house, closing the door firmly behind her. I stood there in the middle of the street, watching my breath crystallize in the frigid air, feeling the familiar burn of injustice in my chest. When I got back inside my house, I called my friend Marcus, who was an attorney, though not the kind I needed for this situation. He practiced family law, but I figured he might know someone who could help. They cannot do that, Marcus said after I explained the situation. Well, they can fine you according to their bylaws, but if you are running a licensed business from your home and the city has granted you the proper permits, they are on shaky ground. What should I do? Document everything. Take photos, record times, keep copies of all correspondence. And show up to that board meeting. Do not let them steamroll you. I spent the rest of that day servicing my clients and thinking about Patricia's words. The truth was, I knew exactly why she was targeting me. 6 months ago, during a particularly heated HOA meeting about landscaping requirements, I had voted against her proposal to mandate specific types of grass for all front lawns. It was an absurd overreach that would have cost homeowners thousands of dollars, and I had spoken out against it publicly. The proposal failed by 2 votes, and Patricia had barely spoken to me since. The following morning, I set my alarm for 6:45 a.m., determined to comply with the noise restrictions even if it meant being late for my first clients. I sent out a mass text to my morning appointments, explaining there might be delays due to HOA restrictions. Most were understanding, but 2 were not. Greg's Hardware and Mountain View Medical Center both had strict requirements about their parking lots being cleared before their businesses opened at 7 and 8, respectively. Greg's was particularly adamant. Cole, I like you, but if you cannot guarantee the lot is clear before we open, I will have to find someone else, Greg told me over the phone. I have customers who show up right at 7, and I cannot have them walking through snow. I lost both accounts that day. 3 days later, another fine arrived. This one was for $500. According to Patricia's detailed notes, I had started my truck at 6:52 a.m., 8 minutes before the allowed time. I had video evidence from my doorbell camera showing it was actually 7:02 a.m., but the fact that they were watching me so closely made my skin crawl. I showed up to the February board meeting with a folder full of documentation, copies of my business license, my city permits, printouts of the city noise ordinances, and my doorbell camera footage. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a modest building near the neighborhood playground. About 30 residents were in attendance, which was unusually high. Patricia sat at the head table with 4 other board members: Richard Montgomery, Susan Price, David Chen, no relation to my elderly neighbor, and Jennifer Walsh. Patricia called the meeting to order with practiced efficiency, working through the usual business of reviewing financials and discussing upcoming community events. When we finally reached new business, I raised my hand. The chair recognizes Coleman Garrett, Patricia said, her tone already dismissive. I stood up, folder in hand. I am here to appeal the fines I have received regarding my snow removal business. I believe these fines are discriminatory and violate my rights to operate a licensed, legitimate business from my home. A murmur went through the crowd. I saw Mrs. Chen give me an encouraging nod from her seat near the back. Mr. Garrett, we have been through this, Patricia said. The bylaws are clear. No excessive noise during restricted hours. This applies to everyone. But it does not apply to everyone, I said, keeping my voice level. Tom Bradshaw runs power tools in his garage. Sarah Mitchell has delivery trucks at all hours. Mike Peterson has his son's band practicing in their basement. Yet I am the only one receiving fines. Mr. Bradshaw's workshop does not operate during restricted hours, Richard Montgomery interjected, and Miss Mitchell cannot control when delivery services arrive. I cannot control when my clients need their parking lots cleared, I countered, and I have video evidence showing that I did not violate the time restriction on my second fine. I started my truck at 7:02 a.m., not 6:52. I walked up to the table and handed Patricia a USB drive with the footage. She took it with obvious reluctance. "We will review this and get back to you," she said. "However, even if this particular fine is found to be in error, the first fine stands, and you have been observed leaving at prohibited hours on multiple other occasions." "Because my business requires it," I said, frustration creeping into my voice. "I have already lost 2 clients because of these restrictions. You are actively damaging my livelihood over 8 minutes of truck noise in the morning." "Perhaps you should have considered that before choosing to operate a commercial business from a residential property," Patricia said coldly. "This meeting is adjourned." I walked out of that clubhouse feeling defeated. Several neighbors stopped me in the parking lot to express their support, including Mrs. Chen, who grabbed my arm with her small, weathered hand. "She is wrong," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "You are a good neighbor. You help people. She only cares about power." "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. I appreciate that." "My son is lawyer," she continued. "He might help you." I thanked her but explained I was looking into legal options already. That night, I did research on HOA discrimination cases and found myself going down a rabbit hole of horror stories. People who had been fined into bankruptcy, foreclosed upon, harassed relentlessly, all at the hands of overzealous HOA boards. But I also found stories of people who fought back and won, particularly in cases where the HOA was found to be selectively enforcing rules. The next morning, I received an email from Patricia. The second fine had been rescinded based on my video evidence, but the email came with a warning. Any future violations would result in escalating fines starting at $1,000, and continued violations could result in legal action to force me to cease business operations. I knew then that I needed serious legal help. Marcus had given me the name of an attorney who specialized in disability rights and discrimination law, though I had not understood why at the time. Her name was Amanda Norton, and her office was in downtown Boulder. I called and made an appointment for the following Tuesday. When I walked into her office, I was immediately struck by how accessible everything was. Wide doorways, lowered reception counters, and clear pathways throughout. Amanda herself used a wheelchair, and she greeted me with a firm handshake and sharp, intelligent eyes. "So tell me about your HOA problem," she said, gesturing for me to sit. I explained everything: the fines, the board meeting, Patricia's obvious targeting of my business, the loss of clients. Amanda listened without interrupting, taking notes on a tablet. "And this is definitely selective enforcement?" she asked when I finished. "Absolutely. There are at least 5 other home-based businesses in the neighborhood, not to mention other noise sources during those hours that go completely ignored." Amanda leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "Tell me about your business. You do snow removal." "Snow removal, leaf clearing, basic landscaping in warmer months. I have all the proper licenses and permits from the city. I have been doing this for 3 years. How many employees?" "Just me right now." "I have been thinking about expanding, but with these HOA issues, I am hesitant to invest more." "Do you have any clients with disabilities? Any properties that require accessibility compliance?" I thought about it. "Several of my commercial clients are medical offices and public facilities that have ADA requirements. Yes, Mountain View Medical Center was one of the accounts I lost. They specifically needed early clearing because they have patients with mobility issues who arrive for early appointments." Amanda's eyes lit up. "That is interesting. Tell me more about that." "What does that have to do with my HOA problem?" "Potentially everything," she said. If your HOA is restricting your ability to provide services that are necessary for HOA compliance at your client's locations, they may be interfering with disability rights. But more importantly, let me ask you this. Do you have any clients in your own neighborhood who depend on your services for accessibility reasons? I thought immediately of Mrs. Chen, my elderly neighbor. I clear her driveway and walkway every time it snows because she cannot do it herself and she has mobility issues. She had a hip replacement last year. And you do this before 7 a.m. Usually, yes. I try to get it done before she wakes up so she does not have to worry about it. Amanda smiled. Coleman, I think your HOA may have just violated the Fair Housing Act. I stared at her, not following. How? The Fair Housing Act prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability. This includes actions by HOAs that restrict residents from receiving services they need due to their disabilities. If your neighbor requires snow removal services to safely access her property, and the HOA is preventing you from providing those services through discriminatory enforcement of their bylaws, they are potentially liable. But the bylaws apply to everyone, I said, echoing Patricia's words. Yes, but are they enforcing them against everyone? And are those bylaws reasonable? More importantly, the FHA requires HOAs to provide reasonable accommodations for residents with disabilities. Your neighbor has a right to request accommodation, and that accommodation might include allowing early morning snow removal services. My head was spinning. I never thought about it that way. Most people do not, which is why HOAs get away with this kind of thing all the time. Here is what I suggest. We document everything about the selective enforcement. We get a statement from your neighbor about her medical needs. We identify all other noise violations in the neighborhood that are being ignored. And then we send a letter to your HOA explaining that their actions are discriminatory and potentially violate federal law. Will that be expensive? Amanda quoted me her rates, which were steep, but not impossible. However, she continued, if we can prove discrimination, the HOA may be liable for your attorney fees under the FHA. And if they have been acting maliciously, there could be additional damages. I thought about the 2 accounts I had lost, the stress of the past few weeks, Patricia's smug face across the street. Let's do it. Over the next 2 weeks, Amanda and I built our case methodically. She sent an associate to photograph and document every home business in Meadowbrook Estates. We found 8 in total, not including mine. Tom Bradshaw's carpentry workshop, which regularly operated power tools at all hours. Sarah Mitchell's online boutique with constant delivery traffic. Mike Peterson's son's band, which practiced in the basement on weekday evenings and sometimes went past 10 p.m. Jennifer Walsh, who was actually on the HOA board, ran a dog grooming business from a converted garage, complete with barking dogs throughout the day. We obtained a sworn statement from Mrs. Chen about her medical needs and her dependence on my services. Her doctor provided a letter confirming her mobility restrictions and the necessity of keeping her walkways clear of snow and ice. Amanda's associate also uncovered something interesting. Patricia Henderson had filed noise complaints against me 4 times before the fine started, but she had never filed complaints about any other resident. The complaints were all logged in the HOA records, which we obtained through a formal request. On February 28th, Amanda sent a formal letter to the HOA board. It was 15 pages long, meticulously detailed and absolutely devastating. It outlined the selective enforcement, cited specific provisions of the Fair Housing Act, documented Mrs. Chen's need for reasonable accommodation, and demanded that all fines be rescinded immediately. It also demanded that I be allowed to operate my business without restriction, consistent with how other home businesses were being treated. The letter concluded with a warning. If the HOA did not comply within 14 days, we would file a formal complaint with the Department of Housing and Urban Development and pursue legal action in federal court. I hand-delivered copies to each board member's house. Patricia answered her door in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. When I handed her the envelope, her face went pale as she skimmed the first page. "This is absurd," she said. "We are not discriminating against anyone." "Then why am I the only person being fined for operating a home business?" I asked calmly. "Why has Jennifer Walsh never been fined for her dog grooming business, which operates all day and involves barking dogs? Why has Tom never been fined for using his table saw at 8 p.m.? Why am I the only one, Patricia? Your business is different. The noise level is excessive. My truck is no louder than a delivery truck, which Sarah gets multiple times per day without any fines. My snow blower is no louder than Tom's power tools. The only difference is that you do not like me, and you have decided to abuse your position to drive my business out of the neighborhood. I have done no such thing. This is about community standards. Then I will see you in court," I said, and walked away. The HOA's response came exactly 13 days later, one day before the deadline. It was not what I expected. Instead of compliance or a defensive letter, they sent a notice calling an emergency board meeting to discuss important community matters. The meeting was scheduled for March 15th, and attendance was mandatory for board members with all residents invited. "They are stalling," Amanda said when I showed her the notice. "They are hoping to buy time to figure out their strategy, but this could actually work in our favor. They will have to discuss this in an open meeting, which means it is on the record." The day of the meeting, I arrived early with Amanda. The clubhouse was packed, with far more residents than had attended any previous meeting I had seen. Word had clearly spread about the dispute. Mrs. Chen was there, along with Tom Bradshaw, Sarah Mitchell, and several other neighbors I recognized but did not know well. Patricia called the meeting to order, her face tense and drawn. The other board members looked equally uncomfortable, except for Jennifer Walsh, who avoided eye contact with everyone. "We are here to discuss a legal matter that has been brought to the board's attention," Patricia began. "Mr. Garrett has retained legal counsel regarding fines issued for noise violations. His attorney has made several accusations that the board takes very seriously. Accusations that are well documented and accurate," Amanda said from her seat beside me. She had not been formally recognized to speak, but her voice carried authority. Patricia's jaw tightened. "You are out of order. This is a board meeting, not a legal proceeding." "Actually," Amanda said, wheeling forward slightly, "under Colorado law and your own bylaws, any resident may speak during the open comment period. I am here as Mr. Garrett's representative, and I have several things the board needs to hear." "The open comment period is at the end of the meeting," Richard Montgomery said. "Then let us get to it," Amanda replied smoothly. "I assume you are going to address the substance of my letter." Patricia exchanged glances with the other board members. Whatever they had planned, Amanda's presence had clearly thrown them off balance. "The board has reviewed the allegations in your letter," Patricia said carefully. "While we disagree with many of your characterizations, in the interest of community harmony, we are prepared to offer a compromise." "I am listening," I said. "The board proposes to rescind the outstanding fines against Mr. Garrett and to establish a new set of guidelines for home-based businesses that will apply equally to all residents." These guidelines will include registration requirements, insurance verification, and specific operational parameters. That sounds reasonable on its surface, Amanda said, but the devil is in the details. What are these operational parameters? Susan Price spoke up, consulting a document in front of her. All home businesses would be required to operate only between the hours of 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. All equipment and vehicles would need to be stored out of sight when not in use. No client visits to the property. No employees other than residents of the home. I felt my stomach drop. Those restrictions would effectively kill my snow removal business. Those parameters are ridiculous, I said. Snow removal has to happen early in the morning, often before dawn. That is the nature of the business. Those same restrictions would destroy Sarah's delivery-based business, Tom's carpentry work, and half the other home businesses in the neighborhood. We are trying to find a reasonable middle ground, David Chen said. The community has legitimate concerns about noise and commercial activity in a residential neighborhood. Where are these concerned residents? Amanda asked, gesturing to the crowd. Because I see a room full of people who support Coleman. I see his neighbors who depend on his services. I see other home business owners who are worried that you are coming for them next. What I do not see is anyone complaining about Coleman's business except the board members sitting at that table. That is not the point, Patricia said. We have a responsibility to maintain community standards. You have a responsibility to follow the law, Amanda said sharply. And right now, you are in violation of federal law. Let me be very clear about what is at stake here. My client has a neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who has a documented disability that requires regular snow removal services to safely access her home. The Fair Housing Act requires you to provide reasonable accommodation for her disability. Reasonable accommodation in this case means allowing Mr. Garrett to provide those services when they are actually useful, which is early in the morning after snowfall. Mrs. Chen could hire any snow removal service, Jennifer Walsh said. It does not have to be Mr. Garrett. She has chosen Mr. Garrett because he is reliable, affordable, and he knows her specific needs, Amanda countered. The FHA does not require her to use the most convenient option for the HOA. It requires the HOA to accommodate her disability-related needs. By preventing Mr. Garrett from operating his business, you are denying her that accommodation. Mrs. Chen stood up from her seat in the back. I would like to speak, she said, her voice quavering slightly but determined. Patricia looked like she wanted to object, but with the entire room watching, she nodded. The chair recognizes Mrs. Chen. I am 82 years old, Mrs. Chen said. I have arthritis and bad hip. Last winter, before Coleman start helping me, I fall on ice on my driveway. I break my wrist. I spend 3 days in hospital. Coleman helps me since then. He clears snow early so I can go to doctor appointments, so I can get mail, so I can live my life. If he cannot help me anymore because of your rules, I will fall again. Maybe next time I break more than wrist. Maybe next time I die. You are willing to risk my life for your rules. The room was silent. I saw several residents nodding and a few were wiping their eyes. Even some of the board members looked uncomfortable. Patricia cleared her throat. Mrs. Chen, we are not trying to put you at risk. If you require accommodation under the ADA, you can submit a formal request, and the board will review it. The ADA does not apply to HOAs, Amanda said quietly. The Fair Housing Act does, and Mrs. Chen should not have to beg for the right to receive services she needs. This is exactly the kind of discriminatory barrier the FHA was designed to prevent. So what do you want? Richard Montgomery asked, his voice tired. What will make this go away? I want you to leave Coleman alone, Amanda said. I want all fines rescinded. I want a written acknowledgement that home-based businesses are permitted in this community, subject only to reasonable restrictions that do not discriminate based on the type of business. I want confirmation that Coleman can operate his snow removal business according to the legitimate needs of his clients and his neighbors, including early morning operations when necessary. And I want a formal apology for the targeted harassment he has endured. Patricia's face flushed red. We have not harassed anyone. We were enforcing the bylaws. Selectively and maliciously, Amanda said. I have documentation showing that you, personally, Patricia, have filed 4 noise complaints against Coleman and 0 complaints against any other resident, despite multiple noise sources in the neighborhood. I have documentation showing that other home businesses operate without any interference while Coleman has been fined repeatedly. I have documentation showing that you began this campaign of complaints shortly after Coleman voted against your landscaping proposal. This is not about noise or community standards. This is about retaliation and abuse of power. That is defamatory, Patricia said, standing up abruptly. I will not sit here and be accused of corruption. Then resign, someone shouted from the crowd. I turned and saw it was Tom Bradshaw. You have been on a power trip since you became president. We are all sick of it. Several other residents voiced their agreement. The meeting was deteriorating rapidly, and Patricia was losing control of the room. This meeting is adjourned, Patricia announced, grabbing her papers. You cannot adjourn without a vote, Sarah Mitchell called out. That is in the bylaws. I second the motion to adjourn, Jennifer Walsh said quickly. All in favor, Patricia said. Wait, David Chen said, still seated. We need to resolve this issue. Running away from it is not going to make the legal problems disappear. The board will meet in executive session to discuss legal strategy, Patricia said. We will communicate our decision to the community within 7 days. You have 7 days from the date of my original letter, Amanda reminded her, which was February 28th. We are past the deadline. If you do not resolve this immediately, I am filing a complaint with HUD tomorrow morning. Patricia stared at Amanda, and I could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. She was weighing her options, trying to figure out if Amanda was bluffing. But Amanda's expression was calm and certain. She had all the documentation, all the evidence, and the law on her side. Fine, Patricia said finally. The board will vote now on rescinding all fines against Mr. Garrett and establishing a policy of non-interference with legally licensed home businesses, subject to reasonable and non-discriminatory restrictions. I need more specifics than that, Amanda said. You are not a member of this HOA, Patricia snapped. You do not get to dictate terms. Then I will see you in federal court, Amanda said, pulling out her phone. I can file the complaint right now electronically. Would you like me to do that while everyone watches? The standoff lasted maybe 10 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Finally, Richard Montgomery spoke up. Patricia, this is not worth it. We are in the wrong here. Let us just fix this and move on. Patricia looked at him like he had betrayed her. Richard, we cannot just cave to threats. It is not a threat. It is a promise, Amanda said. And it is based on federal law that you are clearly violating. Every day you continue this harassment is another day of damages. Every dollar you spend fighting this in court is wasted money that could be spent maintaining this community. You have already cost Coleman 2 clients and caused him substantial stress and financial harm. How much more damage are you willing to do before you admit you are wrong? Susan Price raised her hand. I move that we rescind all fines against Coleman Garrett and acknowledge that legally licensed home businesses are permitted in Meadowbrook Estates, subject only to the same reasonable restrictions that apply to all residents, with no special restrictions based on business type. "I second," David Chen said. "All in favor?" Richard Montgomery asked, effectively taking over the meeting from Patricia. "Aye," Susan said. "Aye," David said. "Aye," Richard said. Jennifer Walsh hesitated, then said quietly, "Aye." All eyes turned to Patricia. Her face was a mask of fury, but she was cornered. "Nay," she said. "Motion passes 4-1, Richard said. "Coleman, we apologize for the trouble this has caused. The fines are rescinded and you are free to operate your business. We will put this in writing and have it to you by tomorrow." I let out a breath I did not know I had been holding. "Thank you. This is not over," Patricia said, gathering her things. "I will be reviewing this decision with our HOA attorney." "Please do," Amanda said, "and have that attorney call me. I would be happy to explain the Fair Housing Act to them." Patricia stormed out of the clubhouse, with Jennifer Walsh scurrying after her. The remaining board members looked exhausted but relieved. The crowd of residents began to disperse, and several people stopped to congratulate me or shake Amanda's hand. Mrs. Chen made her way over slowly, leaning on her cane. "Thank you," she said to both of us. "You did good thing tonight." "Thank you for speaking up," I said. "That made all the difference." "Sometimes old lady has to be brave," she said with a slight smile. Over the next few days, I received the written confirmation from the HOA, signed by 4 board members. Patricia's signature was notably absent. The document was brief but clear. All fines were rescinded. I was free to operate my business, and the HOA acknowledged that home-based businesses were permitted under the same general community guidelines that applied to all residents. Amanda sent a final letter confirming that the matter was resolved, and that we would not be pursuing further legal action, provided the HOA honored its commitments. She also noted that any future retaliation or selective enforcement would result in immediate legal action with claims for damages and attorney fees. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning in early April, I was loading my truck for a landscaping job when a police car pulled up in front of my house. My heart sank. What had Patricia done now? Officer Rodriguez got out of the car, a tablet in his hand. "Are you Coleman Garrett?" "Yes, officer." "Is there a problem?" "I received a complaint about a commercial vehicle parked in a residential driveway. The complainant says it is in violation of city ordinances." I looked at my truck, which was clearly marked with my business logo and had a small trailer attached. "I have operated this business from my home for 3 years. I have all the proper permits. Can I see them?" I went inside and retrieved my file of business documents: city business license, vehicle registration, insurance certificates, and the HOA resolution confirming I could operate from my home. Officer Rodriguez reviewed everything carefully. "Everything looks in order," he said. "Who filed the complaint?" "I can guess," I said. "Patricia Henderson across the street. She is the HOA president and she has been trying to shut down my business." Officer Rodriguez made a note on his tablet. "This is the 3rd complaint we have received about properties in this neighborhood in the past week, all filed by the same person, all regarding alleged code violations that turn out to be either non-violations or things that are not actually our jurisdiction." "She is harassing me," I said. "And apparently other people too." "That is starting to look like what is happening," Officer Rodriguez agreed. "I am going to document that this complaint was unfounded and note the pattern of frivolous reports. If this continues, we can pursue charges for misuse of emergency services or filing false reports." After he left, I called Amanda and explained what happened. She was not surprised. "This is classic retaliation," she said. Keep documentation of every police visit, every complaint, everything. If she keeps this up, we can add harassment and retaliation to our claims. But the police visits were just the beginning. Over the next month, I received citations from the city for alleged code violations. My grass was supposedly too long. It was not. I was allegedly running a business without proper signage permits. I had the permits. My trailer was supposedly blocking the sidewalk. It was fully within my property line. Each citation required me to take time away from work to visit city offices, provide documentation, and get the citations dismissed. Patricia also ramped up her HOA complaints. She sent letters to every resident claiming I was operating a commercial garage in a residential neighborhood. She started a petition to change the HOA bylaws to ban all home businesses. She showed up at city council meetings to complain about inadequate code enforcement in residential neighborhoods. Through all of this, Amanda documented everything. Every frivolous complaint, every letter, every citation, every police visit. She was building a harassment case, and it was becoming overwhelming. The breaking point came in late May. I woke up one morning to find that someone had spray-painted commercial trash across my garage door in bright red paint. My security camera had been disabled. The cable cut sometime during the night. I called the police immediately. This time, a detective came out, a woman named Detective Sarah Mills. She took photos, collected what evidence there was, and took my statement. "You have any idea who might have done this?" she asked. "I have a pretty good idea," I said, and explained the entire situation with Patricia and the HOA. Detective Mills was quiet for a moment, reviewing her notes. "I am going to be honest with you. Vandalism cases like this are hard to solve without direct evidence. But given the pattern of harassment you are describing, I think there is enough here to investigate. Can you get me copies of all the documentation you mentioned?" I gave her Amanda's contact information, and the two of them spoke at length. Over the following weeks, Detective Mills conducted a thorough investigation. She interviewed neighbors, reviewed HOA records, pulled reports of all the complaints filed against me and others. She discovered that I was not the only one being targeted. Tom Bradshaw had received multiple citations for his carpentry workshop after he spoke up in my defense at the board meeting. Sarah Mitchell had been reported to the city for operating a business without a commercial address. Even David Chen, the board member who had supported me, found himself facing a sudden HOA audit of his property for alleged violations. The pattern was undeniable. Patricia was using her position as HOA president, combined with false reports to city authorities, to wage a campaign of harassment against anyone who opposed her or supported me. Detective Mills brought all of this to the district attorney's office in late June. What happened next was something I never expected. On July 8, 2025, Patricia Henderson was arrested at her home and charged with multiple counts of filing false reports, harassment, and abuse of a public office. The last charge was possible because HOA board members in Colorado are considered to be in a position of public trust when managing community affairs. The arrest made local news. I watched the footage of Patricia being led out of her house in handcuffs, her face a mixture of shock and fury, and felt no satisfaction, only exhaustion. This whole ordeal had consumed nearly 6 months of my life. Jennifer Walsh resigned from the HOA board the same day. In her resignation letter, which was sent to all residents, she admitted that she had gone along with Patricia's harassment campaign because she feared being targeted herself. She apologized to me specifically and to the community generally. The remaining board members called an emergency election to fill the vacant positions. Tom Bradshaw and Sarah Mitchell both ran and won. The new board's first action was to pass a comprehensive resolution protecting home-based businesses and prohibiting selective enforcement of bylaws. They also hired a new property management company to handle day-to-day HOA operations, removing much of the power that had allowed Patricia to abuse her position. Amanda and I discussed whether to pursue a civil lawsuit against Patricia personally for the damages I had incurred. I had lost clients, spent money on legal fees, lost sleep, and suffered significant stress. But ultimately, I decided against it. The criminal charges were enough, and I wanted to move forward, not stay mired in the conflict. Patricia's criminal case went to trial in November. I was called to testify, which meant facing her again in a courtroom. She looked diminished somehow, her usual confident demeanor replaced with something harder and more bitter. Her attorney argued that she had genuinely believed she was protecting the community and had not intended to file false reports. But the evidence was overwhelming. The jury found her guilty on all counts after only 3 hours of deliberation. She was sentenced to 18 months probation, 200 hours of community service, and ordered to pay restitution to me and 3 other residents who had been targeted. The judge also issued a permanent restraining order prohibiting her from holding any HOA office in Colorado for 10 years. By December, life in Meadowbrook Estates had largely returned to normal. I had rebuilt my client roster, adding several new accounts to replace the ones I had lost. Mrs. Chen's driveway and walkway were always clear after every snowfall. The new HOA board was functional and reasonable, focused on actual community maintenance rather than power plays. On Christmas Eve, I was loading my truck for a final round of pre-holiday snow clearing when Tom Bradshaw walked over from his house. "Hey Cole, got a minute?" "Sure, what is up?" "The board wanted me to give you this," he said, handing me an envelope. "It is not much, but we wanted to acknowledge what you went through." I opened it to find a check for $5,000. "What is this? Reimbursement for your legal fees, or at least partial reimbursement?" We pulled it from the HOA's legal reserve fund. Technically, it was HOA business, and you should not have had to pay out of pocket to defend yourself against our own president's harassment. I stared at the check, unexpectedly moved. "Tom, you did not have to do this." "Yeah, we did. You stood up when it mattered and it cost you. That is not right. Plus, you do good work and you are a good neighbor. Mrs. Chen told us you have been refusing to let her pay you for clearing her driveway. She is on a fixed income. It takes me 10 minutes. It is not a big deal." "It is to her," Tom said, "and to a lot of us. You showed us what it means to stand up for what is right, even when it is hard. The neighborhood is better because of it." After he left, I sat in my truck for a while, the check in my hand, watching the snow begin to fall again over Meadowbrook Estates. The street lights were coming on, and houses were lit up with Christmas decorations. Patricia's house across the street was dark and empty. She had moved out shortly after the trial, relocating somewhere out of state according to neighborhood gossip. My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. "Merry Christmas, Cole. Glad we could help you win this one. You earned it." I texted back my thanks, then started my truck. The familiar rumble of the engine sounded like freedom now, not like something I had to apologize for. I had 8 driveways to clear before morning, including Mrs. Chen's, and the snow was not going to wait. As I pulled out of my driveway at 6:45 a.m. exactly because old habits die hard, I saw lights on in Mrs. Chen's house. She was standing at her window watching. When she saw me looking, she raised her hand in a small wave. I waved back, then got to work. The whole ordeal had taught me something important about HOAs, about standing up for yourself, and about community. HOAs are supposed to serve the residents, not control them. When they lose sight of that purpose, when they become tools for petty tyrants to exercise power over their neighbors, they become something toxic. But they can also be reformed, redirected, turned back into what they should be. Communities of people trying to maintain their shared spaces and look out for each other. It had taken an HOA lawyer to prove that my business was being discriminated against, to show that the restrictions being placed on me were not about noise or community standards, but about power and control. It had taken federal law and the threat of serious legal consequences to make the HOA back down. But it had also taken neighbors willing to speak up, witnesses willing to testify, and a community that ultimately decided Patricia's way was not the way they wanted to live. As I cleared Mrs. Chen's driveway that morning, I thought about all the people who face similar situations and do not have the resources to fight back. People who lose their homes to foreclosure over unpaid HOA fines. People who are bullied into compliance by boards drunk on small-time power. People who just give up because the fight seems too hard. I had been lucky. I had Amanda, who knew exactly what laws were being broken and how to prove it. I had supportive neighbors willing to stand with me. I had documentation and security cameras and the resources to fight. Not everyone has those advantages. That is why I decided to do something about it. In January 2026, I started attending city council meetings, advocating for HOA reform in Colorado. I shared my story with local news outlets, pushing for better oversight of HOAs and stronger protections for homeowners. I connected with other people who had been abused by their HOAs and helped them find legal resources. By March, the City Council had formed a task force to study HOA regulations and recommend reforms. I was invited to serve on that task force, along with Amanda, several other attorneys, HOA board members from well-run communities, and residents who had experienced HOA abuse. We spent 6 months developing recommendations, mandatory training for HOA board members, stricter rules about selective enforcement, better appeal processes for homeowners, transparency requirements for HOA finances, and penalties for board members who abuse their authority. The recommendations were introduced as a city ordinance in September and passed with overwhelming support. Boulder was not the first city to implement HOA reforms, and it would not be the last. But it was our city, and we had made it better. The ordinance became a model that other Colorado cities began to adopt. My business thrived. By the end of 2026, I had hired 2 employees and expanded my services. I bought a second truck and began bidding on larger commercial contracts. The irony was not lost on me that Patricia's attempts to destroy my business had ultimately resulted in me becoming more successful and more visible in the community. Mrs. Chen passed away peacefully in her sleep in February 2027, at the age of 84. Her son contacted me to say that his mother had left me something in her will, a small plaque that read, "Good neighbors make good communities." He said she had commissioned it months before her death, wanting me to have a reminder of what I had fought for. I mounted that plaque in my office, next to my business license and the framed copy of the HOA resolution that had ended the harassment. Every time I looked at it, I remembered why all of this had mattered. The snow removal business was never just about money or success. It was about being part of a community, helping people, doing work that mattered. Patricia had tried to take that away from me, using rules and regulations as weapons. But she had failed because the law, when properly applied, protects people's rights to make a living and to receive the services they need. The Americans with Disabilities Act and the Fair Housing Act were not just abstract laws. They were tools that protected real people like Mrs. Chen, ensuring they could live with dignity and independence. They were shields against discrimination and abuse of power. Amanda had shown me how to use those tools, and in doing so, she had not just saved my business. She had taught me how to fight back against injustice. Years later, I would still see Patricia occasionally, from a distance, usually at public meetings where HOA issues were being discussed. She never acknowledged me, and I did not seek her out. She had paid her legal penalties and served her probation. Whether she learned anything from the experience, I could not say. Some people are incapable of seeing past their own need for control. But I had learned something. That standing up for yourself is worth the cost, that communities can heal and reform when enough people demand it, and that the law, for all its complexity and frustration, can be a powerful force for justice when wielded by someone who understands it. My business continues to grow, serving Meadowbrook Estates and a dozen other neighborhoods across Boulder. Every morning during snow season, I start my truck at 7 a.m. exactly, not because I have to anymore, but because it is a reasonable time that respects my neighbors while still allowing me to serve my clients effectively. The new HOA board sends out a newsletter every month highlighting community members and their contributions. I was featured once, along with several other home-based business owners. The article talked about how small businesses are the backbone of communities, providing personalized services and supporting local economies. It was a far cry from the letters I had received calling my business a nuisance. The whole experience taught me that homeowners associations can be forces for good or for tyranny, depending entirely on who is wielding the power and whether anyone is watching. Transparency, accountability, and residents willing to stand up for their rights are the only things that keep HOAs honest. I think about what would have happened if I had not fought back. If I had just paid the fines, stopped my business, moved away, or complied with whatever restrictions Patricia wanted to impose, my business would have failed. Mrs. Chen would have lost her independence or risked serious injury. Patricia would have been emboldened to target others with even less restraint. The neighborhood would have learned that power and pettiness win. Instead, the neighborhood learned a different lesson, that bullies can be stopped, that laws exist to protect people's rights, and that communities are stronger when they stand together against abuse. Those are lessons worth fighting for, worth the stress and expense and confrontation. As I write this, sitting in my home office in Meadowbrook Estates on a quiet Sunday afternoon in spring, I can see Patricia's old house across the street. A young family moved in last year, a couple with 2 kids and a dog. The husband works from home, running some kind of software consulting business. The kids play in the front yard. The dog barks sometimes. No one from the HOA has complained. Because the neighborhood understands now that life makes noise, that people need to make livings, that communities are about people living their lives, not about enforcing silence and conformity. That is the world that Amanda and I fought to create, with the help of neighbors who were willing to stand up and a legal system that, when pushed, delivered justice. It was not easy and it was not quick, but it was worth every moment. The snow will fall again next winter. I will be ready with my truck and my plow, starting my rounds early to make sure people like Mrs. Chen, whoever they are in the future, can safely navigate their world. And if anyone tries to stop me, I have Amanda Norton's number in my phone, and I know exactly what the Fair Housing Act says. That is the story of how my HOA fined me for snow removal noise, and how an ADA lawyer proved discrimination against my business. But more than that, it is a story about what happens when ordinary people refuse to accept injustice, when they fight back with the law on their side, and when communities remember that they are supposed to serve their members, not control them. In the end, that is what made all the difference.